Today, we are in for such a treat. We're chatting with Georgie from Teacher's Friend. Georgie has 12 years of experience in 7 different countries. So, from picking the best countries for beginners to work abroad to avoiding pesky TEFL course scams, she's got you covered. So, let's grab a coffee, let's get comfy, and let's hear what she has to say.
Yay, we made it. It took a while, but we made it. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for chatting, teaching us all a little bit about teaching abroad.
You're welcome. I'm super excited.
So I guess let's just get into it. Does that sound good?
Yep, that sounds
Okay.
fine.
Okay, I'd love to know a little bit about how you got into teaching abroad in the first place.
Well, I don't actually remember this, but when I actually did eventually go to teach, my friends like, "Oh, you've been like going on about this since you were like 14," and I was like, "Oh, I have." So like, I think I really like wanted to travel from a young age. Um, and I did a degree that was in community drama. So instead of being like an actor or an actress on stage, I was running workshops within the community, helping like marginalized groups. And so I think I also quite naturally learned a lot of the skills I would need to be a teacher. And I knew it was a really good way to travel, basically. So I basically got into teaching so I could travel. But of course, I also love teaching as well. So I actually graduated. I did my dissertation, which was project based, at the same time as doing my TEFL course, which in hindsight was a terrible idea, but it meant that I was ready to go as soon as I'd done my degree.
Where all did you teach abroad? What different locations?
So I've taught I started in Vietnam, and then I took some time off and I did a motorbike trip through Vietnam for 3 months and some traveling. And then I came back to teaching again in Vietnam. Then I moved to Australia and New Zealand, which a lot of people I think don't think of as a destination for teaching English abroad. But there's a lot of local people that want to go to university abroad or that want to go and move to an English speaking country. So there's a lot of actually teaching English in Australia and New Zealand as well. So I did that, came back to Vietnam. Vietnam's my baby. Taught in Vietnam, and then I also taught in Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, and now I'm in Indonesia.
Oh, wow, you've been busy.
Well, my plan was to go for 6 months, and I'm still here 11 years later. So I'm not really sure what happened, but here I am.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, like, for someone who's interested in teaching abroad, what kind of advice would you give them? Like, how do you even get started doing that? How does one even begin?
Well, first you need to get qualified. So you'd need a TEFL certificate, which is there's a lot to go into about that. But I think choose a TEFL course that's going to prepare you as best as possible. I don't know whether you want me, whether I'll just keep it brief for now. And if you want me to expand on anything, I will. But choose the right TEFL course is definitely my first advice. And then I guess when I was doing it, I was like, what do I want from teaching abroad? And I came up with 4 criteria, which was to be well paid, for a lower cost of living, because it makes it easier, friendly people, and beautiful scenery. So that was what I looked for, which I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty
Sounds
good life.
awesome.
Yeah. And so then I was a bit old school, so I bought like the TEFL guide, and it was an actual book. And I read through the book, but obviously you can do searches online. And I just looked at like all of the countries and like pros and cons and like, highest countries with the highest salary. And then I guess I did my TEFL, and a lot of TEFL providers now will help you with job assistance once you've done your TEFL. But you can also then pay once you've got your TEFL for someone to like basically help you with everything moving abroad, which it depends what kind of person you are, how chaotic you want your life to be, or whether you want someone to be like, it's okay, let me show you.
Yeah, I can see it being really overwhelming because it's probably a new career for people to begin with in a new country, different language a lot of the times. Like it's got to be overwhelming. Like in terms of TEFL courses, are there any that you would Just generally speaking, ones to avoid, ones that are better, what you should look at online versus in person, that sort of thing?
So I always say do an in-person TEFL, even if you're already a teacher, because teaching English as a foreign language to non-native speakers is not the same, even if you're an English teacher, as teaching English to people that speak English as their first language. And I think the biggest oh my gosh moment that students have, because I'm a teacher trainer as well. So when I've been training teachers, they've been like, I don't remember learning this in school. And I'm like, it's because you didn't learn this in school, because it's a completely different way of thinking and learning, because you're not surrounded by English, whereas most people that were born in a native English speaking country obviously were. So doing face-to-face means you've got access to the trainer, you've got access to other people that are going through the same situation as you. Normally these face-to-face courses are abroad, so the minute you land you get to meet people, go out for dinner with them, which helps with like the cultural immersion. And you get to have like real-time practice on your peers. And then all pretty much face-to-face courses have teaching practice, so you actually get to go into a classroom, because it's not the same when you do something with your peers and you ask them a question, they know what you're saying and they can answer you, right? But in the real world, like, students are like, huh? What? Like, you were speaking too fast, or you weren't clear, or there's a whole load of things that can go wrong in a classroom. So it's just really good to get that experience. Having said that, I understand that not everyone can afford a face-to-face TEFL. For one, it's a month long. So yeah, you do need some money to keep you going. And also, obviously, face-to-face costs more money. So I would say if you're nearly there with the budget, just wait and get the money, and it's definitely worth it. But for those of you that can't, your TEFL should be 120 hours minimum. It should include some kind of observed teaching practice. Obviously, it's online, but if you can. And if you can't, there is an option to do like top-up courses where you go and get the experience abroad once you've done your online TEFL, which usually works out cheaper than doing like the whole face-to-face. And then look at who's training. So a lot of people say, with experienced instructors, but because you're new, you don't really know what you're looking for, but you want to look for someone that's been teaching and actually didn't just do it for a year and then was like, oh, I'm going to do something else. So someone that's taught for a significant amount of time, and also someone that's actually trained teachers for a significant amount of time. And so I think they're the main ones. And then there's a whole thing about accreditation. So basically TEFL isn't accredited. There's no, if you do a degree, typically it's government accredited, whereas TEFL isn't. So a lot of providers have now popped up that are like, oh, we accredit TEFL. So accreditation just means that a third party is checking your TEFL to make sure that it follows guidelines. But the problem is that a lot of these third parties have kind of just picked the guidelines out of fresh air because they know they can make money from it. So you should get one that at least says it's accredited, but I wouldn't worry too much about where it's from, unless your TEFL costs less than $250. If your TEFL's less than $250, then it's probably not worth the paper that it's written on, and employers aren't going to accept it. Between $250 and $500, it's probably going to be much more accepted. But I've taught on TEFLs that were government accredited that weren't very good, and TEFLs that weren't government accredited that were better. So in terms of that, don't worry, but it's mostly to do with the price. These super cheap TEFLs, there's not really any thought or training gone into it, which is why they're cheap.
Okay, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is a university degree required generally, or a teaching certificate, or just a general university degree required?
For a lot of jobs, yes, but 100% if you don't have a degree, you can teach abroad. Typically, it means that there's certain countries that you're more limited to for working legally. But again, especially in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of people that are working cash in hand, under the table, etc. So it's definitely not a closed door. Cambodia, Spain, and Costa Rica are 3 really good countries if you're lucky, if you don't have a degree. Again, unfortunately, if you don't have a degree and you're a non-native speaker, you're just adding an extra barrier, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. And there's also the option to work for yourself and do it online. when it doesn't
Oh,
matter whether you have a degree or not.
okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I actually
Yeah.
hadn't heard of Costa Rica for teaching, English.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
It's
new.
not so much on the map because the wages tend to be lower, but you can definitely
Okay.
live there and it's beautiful. And again, for people that are on the opposite side of the world, it means maybe you don't have to go so far from home. And yeah, you don't need a degree, and there are a lot of jobs there.
Like, since the pandemic, I know that the landscape has shifted a little bit in terms of teaching and then changes within China politically. Um, so how have things changed, like, since a few years ago in terms of teaching abroad?
Um, so there's been a big rise in the people that can get TEFLs with only an online TEFL. But it's a catch 22 because there's been a big rise, so it's easier, but it's beginning to come full circle again. Language centers and employers are saying, hold on a minute, you're not as experienced, like you don't have as much of the practical training that we need. But it is online TEFL is a huge thing. So it's easier now, definitely, to get a job with just the online. But like I said, employers do still favor face to face. And there's also, again, a bit of a catch 22. There's a lot more online jobs available, but also there's a lot more people now teaching online. But definitely there's a lot more jobs available than there was before. Like there's particular websites you can go on and they just like list like online teaching jobs. I think if you don't have a degree or you're a non-native speaker, the jobs are there, but you have to dig deeper to find those jobs. But they do definitely exist. And sometimes it's better to be in country to find those jobs. But it's still a growing market. There's still countless people doing it every year. And for example, in Bali, they're actually short of teachers because there's not enough teachers. And like, who doesn't want to teach in Bali? You know, Bali's great. So
Yeah, no kidding. So, like, for someone who's doing this for the first time, what countries would you say would be best for someone just kind of starting out?
Southeast Asia, definitely. That's where I started. And it's generally all the countries here are very safe. Like they're very tourist friendly. Most of the cities, in fact, for pretty much all of the cities, there's some English. So although there's like a bit of a language barrier, it's not the same as like going to the middle of China where there's a lot less English. But even like compared to like Japan and South Korea, because Southeast Asia is so built on tourism, you're a little bit of a novelty, and they kind of know like work with the tourists, like be friendly with foreigners. Whereas Japan, I find in Japan and South Korea, they're a bit more like, take it or leave it, you know? So they're just not quite, I didn't find them quite friendly because why should they be? Like, I'm a stranger. But in Southeast Asia, there's definitely like, oh, let me be your friend. Let me show you around. Like, come and teach me English kind of vibe. And it's cheap. It's probably one of the, like, Southeast Asia in general is probably one of the cheapest places you could live. And the wages are pretty good. The way I put it is I probably earn less than a lot of my friends, but I have more disposable income than a lot of my friends, to put it into that. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yes, that makes sense because the cost of living here in North America, I'm in Canada and it's just gone through the roof lately. So, yes, that
I know,
makes a lot
and
of
like
sense.
Australia, the US, the UK, like it's the same. Like, you know, what I'm living off is like their like monthly bills, like without like actually eating anything. I'm like, wow.
Like, for someone who becomes a first-time teacher, are what kind of obstacles do they usually face? I can imagine there's, like, culturally, it's kind of a shock depending on where they go to.
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of it, a big one is lesson planning. So it takes you a long time to get good at planning. And you either don't plan because you're like, I don't have the time for this. And then you realize once you get into the lesson that, oops, or you do plan and you feel like you're just a constant lesson planning machine. So I think, yeah, learning how to lesson plan to the right amount so that you can be as prepared as possible, but without it taking over your life is a big one. But it gets easier. It's like, I remember learning to drive a car and just thinking like, how are you, I drive manual. So I'm like, how are you possibly meant to change gear and turn and use this sticky thing all at the same time? Like, it's not possible. And then, of course, the more you do it, you're like, oh, yeah, easy. And you just do it without thinking. So definitely lesson planning. And then culturally, generally, especially in Southeast Asia, I found that not that many people struggle with it hugely. Like, yes, it's crazy, but it's very, very foreigner friendly. So as long as you've got the right support network from like a TEFL provider or a teach abroad program or someone that you know that's done it, then people don't tend to struggle with it that much. And the best way to deal with it is, again, just acceptance that it's, you know, you left home for a reason. And because if you begin to like, you know, fantasize about going back home and how amazing it was back home, and then some people, you know, they do end up going home and then they're like, oh yeah, I remember why I left now. So just, I think, understanding that it is going to be different goes a long way. And then the other thing teachers struggle with is classroom management of lots of small children. So there's different issues with different levels. And again, this is something that if you do a quality TEFL course, you'll have practice of it and you'll learn about how to deal with it. But basically, just how to bring the energy up when it's needed, or more often bring the energy down when it's needed. A lot of what I teach is non-verbal communication. You know, no one wants to be that teacher that's like, hello, everybody, be quiet, are you listening? So we teach a lot about that on the course as well. So I think there, yeah, your three big ones. And then for some people, the food.
That's interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't have
getting
thought of
used
that.
to.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very different. So you were talking a little about your course, and I know you started Teacher's Friend a while ago. I'd love to know kind of like what inspired you to teach it, what you do. If you could tell me more
So
about that, that'd be great.
so I had like a friend of a friend who actually started Teacher's Friend, and it was just helping people get a job in Vietnam. And he did it for a few months, and then he decided he didn't really want to do it anymore. And he just put up an ad being like, "I'm getting rid of this. You know, I've got some contacts with schools. I've got this. Does anyone want to do it?" And I've always been like an opportunist. So like, you know, if I see an opportunity, I'm like, maybe I'll take it. So I then took it over, and it's grown so much from what it was. So before, it was just helping people get a job in Vietnam. And then I had someone approach me asking whether I would like to promote teaching TEFL courses for people before they get the job. So I did that. And then I had people approach me from other countries being like, hey, we love what you do. Would you promote our TEFL? So then it's kind of grown. So the two main things that I do are help people get a TEFL course. So that might be an online one or a face-to-face one, and just to choose which one is going to be the best option for them, depending on budget, the country they want to go to, personal circumstance. And then the other one is, once you've got your TEFL, some people get their TEFL and they're like,
Now
okay,
what?
now what? Yeah, like I don't even know where to begin looking for a job, or like, how do I know it's legitimate? And am I really going to get given a job and fly over to this country I've never been to and just start living there, you know? So I think I did a TEFL. I actually did a CELTA, which is like the Cambridge version of a TEFL. And that's like a very highly recognized TEFL. But I still was like, how do I make friends? Like the biggest one for me was like, oh my gosh, I need friends. Like this was like my number one thing. So I actually paid for a teach abroad program. So I feel very proud of the fact that I am selling something that I paid for. So like I did it, and I've been in those people's shoes. I'm not someone that came abroad and like winged it myself and now I'm like, oh, you know, I'll help you. I was that person. And so I think there's a certain kind of person that's like, please just hold my hand. Like, I know I can like research this online and do it myself, but I just don't want to. So that's what the Teach Abroad program is for. It's for people that want help with like everything, someone they can go to for like logistics, social and cultural. And then I've also expanded to help with the academic side, because I'm a teacher trainer. I can help people pass the TEFL course. I can help people with their assignments. And I also now offer lesson planning assistance to bridge the gap between when you finished your TEFL and when you're like those first months of teaching, when you're like, like I'm doing this for real now and I just need a bit of extra support.
Once someone comes to you, they get their TEFL, you've helped get them a position. Is there like any support after that?
Yes. So a big thing that I really focus on is after support. So I'm actually still in touch with teachers from like 5-6 years ago, and they still come back to me asking like, hey, can you help me get a job here, or just like general life help. So I really try to become a friend. Like that's my thing, teacher's friend. And I just love meeting new people. But in terms of like specific support, there's lesson planning support for 2 months after they've started. And then there's also just things like help with career progression. And if they do want to move to another country, I help them to relocate somewhere else.
So I was wondering, like, for someone who wants to kind of learn more about what you do or look into
Mhm.
like what you offer, how do they best do that? Like, how should they reach out?
So if you just want to have a bit of a nosy, then you can go and look at my website, which I don't know, I can give you a link. So on there, there's my story where you can read about how I ended up here. And so I think I mentioned that I came through a teach abroad program, but I kind of felt like I paid them the money and they did the bare minimum. Oh, you're so prepared. So I felt like I kind of paid people the money for my teach abroad program. And then they did the bare minimum, and then I just got left, and it was fine because I did find my feet. But what I want to do is a better job than that. So that's actually one of the reasons that I started Teachers Friends. So you can go and read about my story, and then on there I have information about the TEFL courses that I have, information about the full relocation and the different countries that I have. And I'm just about to actually add a whole list of online options for people that want the cheaper version, which again, I don't recommend it, but I understand, a budget's a budget. So I want to start helping more people that want online courses. And I'm also offering now lesson planning assistance. So you can just buy, like, even if you've already done your TEFL or you've already moved abroad and then you're like, oh, actually, like, I wish I'd gone through someone because now I'm struggling. I offer lesson planning assistance just as in its own right. Again, if you've already done a TEFL, but you're like, how do I get a job? Like, I don't want you to help me with like everything. I just need like a starting point. Then I'm adding that as well. And that will all be on my website under packages.
Okay.
And then you can also go to contact me and just book a call if you're like me and you like talking. I'm not going to get you on a call and then hard sales hit you and move you to the middle of Taiwan when that wasn't where you wanted to be. So yeah, just book a call as well if you want to find out more information.
Okay, that sounds great. I'll put the link in the description too for anybody who's watching this on YouTube, so you can just click through and find out more about that. For someone who's interested and passionate about teaching, what and travel, like, is there anything else that you like to kind of share with them?
Just do it. Honestly, oh my gosh, it kind of gets me emotional. Like, it has like changed my life in like so many ways. And like I said, I've done it for 11 years, and there's just so much that you didn't know about the world, about education, about teaching, about culture, about yourself. I think a lot of people panic about, what am I going to do for my career, or like, if I go, like, what's it going to look like to future employers? But you're going to gain like so many skills, and it actually looks really good on your CV to say that you've done this really scary thing and you've moved abroad and you've lived in another culture. And teaching is like an incredible skill to be able to pass on knowledge to other people, so it's never going to do you any harm. And I have a bit of a reputation for people that come here and then I basically convince them to not go back. So we had one girl that was from like corporate London, and she'd done some traveling. She'd taken about 6 months out, and she was just a bit like, yeah, I'm going to go back. Like, I need to get a job. And I was like, why? And she was like, I don't really know. So obviously, if you really want to go back, I'm not going to keep you captive. But for these people that are going back because they feel like they should, or like it's just what you do, so she's ended up staying, and she's teaching kids in a school, and she's actually met somebody here now, and like her life is just going on this whole other path that she, you know, never knew existed. And you don't have to do it forever. Like, I'm not saying come and do it for 11 years and never go back. Just try it, and if you absolutely hated it, go home. Like, but you really haven't got like anything to lose. And I think just daring to leave is like the hardest thing. And that's why I try to be that person, to be like, I'll take your hand, I will guide you through it. And the friends that I have made are like, I've got friends that I met in Hanoi 11 years ago that like I just helped him to get a job back in the UK on like his ideal salary. And again, he still has all this experience, but now he's gone back. Like, some people go back, some people don't. But yeah, he was like, oh my gosh, like I've just got this job and it's my dream job. But like that came from, he came to Vietnam to teach English. And then he ended up working in a bike shop, helping people to sell motorbikes, because he found out that actually he loves motorbikes, which he didn't know until he came to Asia. Same with me. I have a full motorbike license now. Like, I can ride like I don't know, it's like a 650cc Kawasaki, and it's like bigger than me. And I had no idea I've never wanted to ride a motorbike, but that came from moving to Asia. So anyway, so he got this job, and he basically then kind of managed the shop. And so from there, he got a job with TUI, the travel company, and became a tour guide. From there, he's moved up to management, and now he's got a job in the UK managing like a caravan site. But that experience came from moving abroad to teach English. And I think that's another thing that people should be aware of. It's not just that you move abroad to teach English. Like, I now have a business. I've never wanted particularly to be a business owner. I was never like, oh, I want to be my own boss. Like, I love working with people. And it just opens up all these doors that might not actually even end up being teaching. And that is like so exciting.
That's fantastic. It's really interesting to hear the real person perspective from people who've gone and done this and what they end up doing with their lives.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
it's super exciting. And again, I won't go into it now, but I have like so many examples of people that have come to teach English, and then other opportunities have opened up as well, just by like daring to do something different and go and try something.
Is there anything else you want to share, or anything you think we missed?
I guess the other thing I would add is that I think if you come through Teacher's Friend, I can help you with a lot of stuff that maybe you haven't thought about. So there's a lot of stuff that we maybe didn't go into in so much detail, but for example, medical insurance. That's something that I think a lot of people they get travel insurance, which is different to medical insurance, because travel insurance will insure you for a small amount of time. And if you have an accident, the first thing they're going to do is send you back home. Medical insurance is a much like longer term thing. And if you did get something like a disease or a condition, it will allow you to make the decision that you still want to stay abroad and get treated abroad, and that you don't have to then, that's the end of your traveling. That's the end of your traveling. Like, now you've got to go home. So again, I can help people get medical insurance. And then, a bike license. I highly recommend, if you're going to come to Southeast Asia, to do like the test in your own country first, which is not what I did. Do as I say, not as I do. Because most medical insurance and travel insurance won't insure you to ride a bike unless you have your home license, which is fair because it's Asia and it is a little bit crazy. So you need a license from your home country, not just a license from where you are. And also, like, it's safer. A lot of people come and they just jump on a bike, and because riding a bike in Asia is like the best way to get around. And when I first came, I was like, I'm not getting on a bike. I went to Vietnam. The traffic in Hanoi is like nothing you have ever seen. But I went to Hanoi, and I was like, I'm not getting on a bike. And I didn't get on a bike for 6 months. And then I was living quite far out. Again, this is one of my issues with a lot of companies that place you. They will like send you into like much further out, like away from like everyone else, because it's where people don't want jobs. So I help people get jobs like in like places where you might actually want to live. So I ended up basically moving closer, but it was much further away from my school. So unless I was going to pay for like bikes every day, I was like, well, I'm going to have to do it. And again, I did a motorbike trip through Vietnam. And although I had insurance, technically, because I didn't have the license, I probably wasn't insured. And again, practice what you preach, but I didn't practice what I preached. But yeah, so get a license, and I think it will just make you feel a lot more confident and a lot more free. And it's just one less thing to deal with, and you don't have to jump on a motorbike the day you arrive, but it's just one less stress to have to deal with once you once you get here.
Yes, it's actually something I wouldn't have thought of at all. You just assume you can take public transport everywhere, and that's not always the case, right? You kind of have to be a little more independent.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you don't want to be taking cars because the traffic here is not ideal. So you get used to getting on a bike and going around the traffic. That definitely helps. But yeah, I guess for me to start out, if you don't have a degree, Cambodia is a great option. I lived in Cambodia for 6 months. It was amazing. The people are super friendly. Because of all the stuff that happened with the genocide in Cambodia, it's actually a really exciting place to be. I think off the top of my head, the average age in Cambodia is about 26 because of how many people were murdered in the Khmer Rouge. But because of that, it's a very young crowd, and there's a lot of like innovation and new ideas happening, and they really need English teachers. So Cambodia is not so on the map, but it's an amazing place, especially if you don't have a degree. And then Vietnam is my baby. Vietnam's a great place, and Thailand. They'd probably be my top three for starting out with teaching English.
That's fantastic. That really kind of helps. Somebody who's looking to get into this, it gives a really good kind of overview of what they need to do, places to go. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, you just reminded me. I think one of your other questions was how to best prepare for like a TEFL or coming over. So I would look up the 12 tenses in English.
Okay.
So there's 12. It's not past, present, and future. So there's things like present perfect, past continuous. And again, this probably won't mean anything to anyone unless you're a non-native English speaker. And that's fine. But go and kind of have a look at it now before you start a TEFL course, because it just makes the overwhelm like a little bit less. Something that I do on my TEFL courses, or if people sign up through me, is a grammar course before you even start, and like a TEFL foundation before you start. I also offer a grammar crash course and a TEFL foundations course, because I think that's something that really overwhelms people, because they're like, I'm English, I speak English, I can teach English. And then they're like, oh, so they're not just learning how to teach, you've actually got to learn like English more than like what's a noun and what's a verb. And we also have people that are like, what is a noun and what's a verb? So,
Well, that's fair enough, right?
yeah, exactly. Because we don't have to think about it, right? We just speak. And the amount of times I've asked someone like, why do you say I have been a teacher? Like, why do we use have been? And they're like, I don't know. I didn't know when I first started teaching. I didn't know. So yeah, definitely have a look at the 12 tenses, just to give you a bit of a head start, and maybe the names of things like this is a subject and this is a verb. And if you do know that you've always, I remember at school not really knowing what a verb was, because people would tell me like, oh, it's an action, and I'd be like, what's an act, like an act, like what? Like I just couldn't get my head around it. So again, if that is something that you struggle with, I think definitely I can help on the course, or just go and do your own research before you go. It will just help.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Okay.
you so much for talking to me. It was really fun. And yeah, I wish you all the best and stay in touch.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thank you for coming on and chatting.
You're welcome. And yeah, hopefully I'll see some people. Come and visit me in Bali if you're in Bali, or if you want to know
Absolutely.
anything about teaching abroad, just come and ask me.
That's amazing. Thank you, Georgie.
You're welcome. Thanks
Okay,
a lot.
bye.
Bye.